How we move, which is often referred to as body language, is called kinesics by social scientists. These are body movements that can change based on where you're from, your culture, and gender. Researchers Ekman and Friesen established 5 basic purposes that these kind of movements serve: emblems, illustrators, affect displays, regulators, and adapters. Emblems are nonverbal signals that can generally be translated directly into words. Most people within a culture or group agree on their meaning. A good example is A-OK, made with the thumb and the forefinger. Because these gestures can be directly translated into words, they are quick to use and unambiguous in their meaning. However, as I noted earlier, culture quickly comes into play when you move outside of your home culture. For instance, in many parts of the world, this gesture is directly translated to OK, but in other places it might be translated as 0 or none, and in others it is even understood to represent an obscene gesture representing a body orifice. This is quite a different interpretation than being OK. So basically, if you go to a different culture or area, for instance, I went to Indiana and Northern Kentucky today, you might not get the same response to a gesture than you would in your home area. So just be cautious if you go abroad. Somewhere they might take offense to an emblem that we think is okay here. A second part of kinesics is illustrators. Illustrators are movements that complement verbal communication by describing or accenting or reinforcing what the speaker is saying. People use illustrators to indicate the size of an object or to draw a picture in the air or to emphasize a key word in what they are saying. These might include pointing to an object in the room or counting on the table. The frequency of use of illustrators may vary by culture, but they are used widely. Use of illustrators can help indicate interest, effort to be clear, or enthusiasm for the topic being discussed. It's sometimes interesting when you look across the room and you see someone using illustrators, because normally you can tell what they're thinking. Like, for instance, if I do this motion, people are thinking I don't understand or I don't get it. It's things like that. Or, for instance, pointing to this book, it means I'm talking about this book in most cultures. The next part of kinesics that I want to speak about is affect displays. Affect displays are nonverbal displays of the body or face that carry an emotional meaning or display affect states. Our gait, which means bouncing, suggesting happiness, for instance, or slouched or shuffling, which suggests depression. And our facial movements, breaking into a big grin, which suggests pleasure, or frowning suddenly, which would indicate displeasure. These, of course, all send messages about our feelings. Affect displays are often spontaneous, and thus they may send signals that we would rather not convey based on social norms or our goals for communications. So, affect displays is all about our personal emotions that we use with our face. You can tell someone a lot about what you are thinking by the look on your face. Another part of kinesics that I wanted to speak on is regulators. Regulators are nonverbal messages that accompany speech to control or regulate what the speaker is saying. These might include the nodding of the head to indicate you are listening or understanding something, for instance, and you are encouraging the speaker to continue. Regulators are often associated with turn-taking in conversation, influencing the flow and pace of discussion. For instance, we might start to move away, signaling that we want communication to stop, or we may raise a finger or lift our head to indicate we want to speak, or perhaps show our palm to indicate we don't want to turn at speaking. So regulators is all about, things we do in speech to either tell someone we want them to continue talking to us, or We want to tell them, to quit talking, things like that. So for instance, if I'm saying, yep, 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 I'm either bored with what you're saying, or I'm really interested and I want you to continue. And sometimes we have to be careful, because if we're on the phone talking to somebody, they're not necessarily going to see us shaking our head to continue. But, we do these things so often that sometimes we do it and we don't even think about it. It just comes natural to us. Another form of kinesics that I wanted to speak about is adapters. Adapters are forms of nonverbal communication that often occur at low levels of personal awareness. They can be thought of a behavior that are done to meet a personal need as one adapts to the specific communication situation. They include behaviors like twisting your hair, tapping a pen, scratching, tugging your ear, pushing your glasses up on your nose, holding yourself, swinging your legs, and other things like that. Given the low level of awareness of these behaviors by the person doing them, the observer is sometimes more aware of the behaviors than the doer of them. Adapters may thus serve unintentionally as clues to how a person is feeling. Adapters are not intended for use in communication, but rather may represent behaviors learned early in life that are somehow cued by the current situation, and which may be increased when the level of anxiety goes up in the situation. So for instance, today on my trip to Kentucky and northern Indiana, I was doing this all day, or the whole trip, with my hair, which was an adapter for, I was bored, and then I was waiting in an office the other day for an interview, and I was tapping or shaking my foot and tapping my pen on the desk. Those types of things showed that I was anxious. So it's really important when you're in situations like that and you go into an interview, or you are doing something important like that, and like maybe you are in an interview for an important job, or maybe you're sitting down for an interview with your master's program, things like that. You have to be careful about the adapters you use, because usually these aren't something you're doing consciously, it's just something you're subconsciously doing. Like for instance, I have a friend that whenever she's sitting around or sitting somewhere, she'll shake her foot. And sometimes it can be distracting because she's doing it so loud that people around her can hear it. And I have to tell her, hey, you might want to quit doing that. You're shaking the whole table. It's things like that are subconscious, and you don't want to give a bad impression on your first, on your first meeting with someone. So really, that's kinesics in a nutshell, because kinesics basically is your own interpretation or something of your own culture. In Ohio, it might be normal to, just leave a room without, talking to the person beside you or saying goodbye or something like that. Like you might be able to just walk out of a room. But in some cultures, bowing is appropriate. We don't do things like that here. But in some cultures, if you don't bow, it could be, offensive. Whereas touching someone, like if you, brush someone's hand, in some cultures, you could get in big trouble for that. So it's things like that you have to be careful with, because, like I said previously, just because something is okay where you come from, it's not okay in other areas. Other things that I thought that I should mention, going back into, affect displays. Sometimes, being the devil's advocate with that, you might look sad, for instance, or you might look slouched and someone might think you're depressed, but really you might just be tired, or you might have had a long day, so you might not be sad or depressed. So, you have to be really careful about how you look because, for instance, if someone that doesn't know you too well sees you and you look depressed, they might be apt to call somebody because, they think, hey, he's depressed. So you just have to be aware of your surroundings and the nonverbal communications that you're giving off because, you might give off some kind of false signal based off of a nonverbal skill that you use. So, for instance, if I'm pointing at someone, and it's a real person and I'm pointing at them, in some cultures that's offensive. Some people in some areas, if you're pointing at them, they think something's wrong. Like, for instance, if someone's shaking their finger at me like this, I'm thinking, they're mad at me for something. And that's just the culture I was brought up with. It's not something that, it's not something really that's always true. Like, someone could be pointing at you and saying, yeah, he's the best person in the world. But in my head, it's something wrong. And say, for instance, I also thought another nice area of nonverbal is pictures. I was thinking of this today because there's so many nonverbals that you can get out of a picture just by looking at a picture. Like, for instance, here, in this picture down here, you look at these people and you can tell that they're at some kind of event or parade or something like that. You can tell that they're all happy. Some actually look like they're in an awkward state, but most of them look happy, and you can tell, like, some of them are standing stern, they're more serious, some are more slouched, they can tell that they, they're just hanging out, and here, you can't tell what we're doing, but you can tell, by looking at all the nonverbals here, that, we look to be at ease, at peace. We look very comfortable. So really, even when you're taking pictures with your significant others or things like that, you have to look at the different signals that you're giving off because, you could have a picture where, you think that you're giving off, like, you could be having the best day of your life, but your nonverbal communications is telling people that, no, he's having an awful day and he doesn't want to be there. So you have to be really cautious about the different nonverbals you're giving off because, I've had people look at me and say, Derrick, you just gave me the look of death, which, something like that look right there is something I just do. And sometimes, it's because I'm annoyed, but most of the time it's just out of habit. It's not that I'm really mad at somebody, it's just, I don't know. Sometimes my mind's thinking something and then my nonverbals give off an answer that just isn't good. So really, these are the types of things that I found out this semester that really interest me. I never thought that there were so many things that I was giving off based off my nonverbal communications until I took this class. So really, that's why Kinesics is important to me, and it has been throughout this whole semester.